What's your name?
Bill Dunahoo.
Tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from.
I live in Portsmouth, Arkansas, 2709 Broken Oaks. From everywhere, I guess.
Where were you born?
Hartford, Arkansas, 1930, August 1st, about 10 o'clock in the morning.
And were you raised in Hartford?
Yes. I was raised there till I was 12 years old. Then we moved to California. On the train. Everything we had, me and my mother, we had in old paper bags. That's true. We arrived in Los Angeles. Now, this was in September 1942. We arrived in Los Angeles. My mother had me walk behind her in case stuff fell out of the bag she was carrying. that was it. And my sister had already moved out there, and she had us a place rented at Fullerton, 714 West Commonwealth, a little court, 2 small rooms, but we had electricity. We never had that before. I just sat and looked at that light bulb, thrilled to death that we finally had electricity. Well, that's at the foot of Sugarloaf Mountain. We had a 2-room shack we lived in. I used to lay on the floor and look at the chickens under the floor through knot holes. And really, we had two small rooms, a fireplace for heat. And in the wintertime, it would snow through the cracks, get on our bed. And I know one time Mama had to put me under the table. Me and my sister, it rained so hard, water coming through the roof. We had to get under the table till the storm passed. But you know what? We survived. Never was sick. We had neighbors that they wouldn't let their kids outside in the winter. They're sick all the time. We was outside barefooted. Never was hardly ever sick. But we didn't have anything. No one had nothing. This was during the Depression days. God forbid we ever go through them again. Well, Mama rolled her cigarettes. We had a little bitty teeny-weeny machine. And we'd pick up these gum wrappers, cigarette butts. We'd go all over town trying to find them, and take them to Mama and get them out, and she'd roll her cigarettes, or we'd help her in that little machine there. Yeah. I forgot that. It's been so long ago. Yeah, Christmas tree, we had gum wrappers, and we'd get the sycamore tree balls and wrap them in foil or whatever, and hang on the tree. That's all we could afford.
Tell me about that.
Well, he did. I was in Kentucky in a revival, and I caught the bus. Like the froze to death. It didn't have a cold wintertime. And went through Denver, Colorado, and up through there, and then down to L.A. And I spent 3 or 4 days with Mama and Mark on my way to Alaska. Go to hold a revival up there. Now, I was just a young man. I didn't know anything, didn't know where I was going, hardly. And they had that little dog. And had that one pair of dress pants. And I got up the next morning, and that dog had chewed a hole in my pants. And I put them on my foot, come through the knee. Candy corn. Well, we lived at Hartford, foot of the mountain, in that 2-room shack. Mama drew $9 a month in the state. That's what we lived on, $9 a month. During the month, Mama would buy a little sugar and lard, charge it and all that stuff, And when we got that $9 check, that was a big day. We'd go to town, go to the post office, general delivery, get that check, go to the store, and Mama would just sign it and give it to the grocery man. We owed it all. Back then, they had candy in bins. Well, we was in there that day to pay the bill, and they had candy corn. I'd never seen that before. And I don't know, sometime he'd give me and my sister a little sack of candy. You could buy a whole sack of candy for a dime, really. And we got this sack of candy corn. We started back home out in the country. Oh, that's so good. I lagged behind Mama and Joanne carried the corn, I eat it. Well, when I got home, we had some corn left. And me and my sister decided we'd raise some. It's so good. We plowed a little furrow out in the yard. We did. And we planted that corn, covered it up. We watered it every day. Finally, we dug it up, ants ate it. Well, I used to sell like a plate of Mina, trying to make extra money. I sold Electrolux, good cleaner. And I know we had a Model E for $77.50. I sold almost everybody in my church a vacuum cleaner. Half of them didn't pay for them. I had to repossess them. That's not good when you're a pastor, and you have to do that. One day I went up to a woman's house to give her a demonstration. Nice home, 2-story home, big organ in the house. They owned the Chrysler place. And I pulled the vacuum cleaner out of the box, and roaches ran everywhere. And she screamed, and I took off after them. I didn't sell her the vacuum cleaner. She didn't buy it.
You didn't vacuum them up?
No, I couldn't find it. They just ran everywhere. Well, in 1970, I was pastor at Mina. Gary, my boy, he was born in 59. He was 11 years old. Pam was 13. We had a preacher in our church that knew a preacher in Haiti. Well, in fact, I kind of knew that preacher down there. Anyway, to make a long story short, that preacher in Haiti had a plane. What they had orphanages. And they offered to fly us down there for 3 days, put us up in a hotel, furnish the food, fly us back for $19 each. Well, I was winning for $19. So we all went, 19 of us from the church went. The plane flew to Hot Springs, and we all got on it. Here we went. Got down to Port-au-Prince, and they put us up at a hotel. The hotel had a wall around it with jagged glass and spikes on the top of the wall to keep the natives out. And down there, they practice voodoo. Now, they do. Late in the evening, about sundown, right after the sun goes down, off in the distance, you boom, 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 yeah, Well, the last night we was there, me and my boy and a guy that was with us, he was a mortician. I began to think we was going to need him. We were sitting up on the roof of the hotel in chairs, and they started voodooing. Boom, 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 And they started doing it right down the street. I said, let's go down there and see what they're doing. I'm curious. And we left the hotel, walked down the street, got down there. There's about 100 people. I don't know what they're doing, but they had different kind of instruments. They was blowing them and everything, carrying on. Well, me and Guy were two tall white men, looking. And finally, the guy that had charge of this, he spied us. And he said, and screamed, pointed us like that. Everything stopped. Phew. I knew then was the wrong place. And they surrounded us. Really, they did. They surrounded us. Well, I looked at my boy. I could rake his eyes off. And I said, don't move. Well, there's a little boy, about 12 years old, come out in front of us with a baton. And he began to twirl that baton and creep toward us. And his eyes was rolling in his head. I never saw nothing like it. Scared me. And I whispered to Guy and Gary, I said, don't move. Let's don't make him mad. Be still. And that boy came. He flipped it around Gary's neck. And he went back. He creeped here. He did Guy the same way. Then he did me the same way. He disappeared into the crowd. Then here come a tall man with a bullwhip. Popped that thing a time or two. He's grinning at us like a possum. I knew that it was time to leave. I said, let's back out of here. And when we get on the street, let's run to the gate. They had a big gate opened up. We could run into the hotel yard. Well, we got on the street, and there's behind us. Hollering, boom, 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 boom. Like a movie you'd see. And we'd walk faster, they'd walk faster. And Finally, when we got to the gate, they had closed it and locked it with a chain. Well, Guy was a big, tall, skinny guy, and there I'm a big, fat thing. And my boy Gary, little old kid, he went under the gate like that. Guy, he climbed the wall, went over where I stood. It's amazing what you can do when you're scared. I looked behind me, and they was almost to me. And I could just see me boiling in a pot. And I climbed that gate like a monkey. I did. I couldn't do it today. I did. I climbed that gate, that wall, got up there. And Pam, my daughter, she was up on the roof. She'll tell you about it. She was watching us. She didn't know what was going on. And I jumped into the darkness in their rock pile. And I took off. And I got to the hotel. I found out later we weren't supposed to have been there. But I figured it out by then. That we was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Shouldn't have been there at all. They may have killed us. I don't know. Quite a story.
You got the hint.
I got the hint. I got the hint, boy. Well, between Hartford and Midland, they're 6 miles apart. There's some transformers on the side of the road where you turn off to go to Huntington. Now, there was a lot of superstition around Hartford, ghost stories. My folks get together on Saturday night and tell ghost stories, scare you half to death. And there was a story that went around that if you come by them transformers on a night when it's storming, a woman dressed in white would jump on the running board of your car. We had running boards back then, you step on them and you get in your car. And she'd ride a ways and jump off. Well, I was preaching a few nights at Midland, my first revival. I was by myself in my way model Ford. And when church was over, it was thundering and lightning. Well, I got in my little way model, got it started to Hartford. And I got to think about that woman dressed in white. The closer I got them transformers, the more uneasy I got. And sure enough, just when I got to the transformers, I come around a little curve, I saw something white on the side of the road, and I thought, oh God, there she is. I almost ran into a ditch. But it was a sign on the side of the road, and I thought it was that spooky woman, But that was just a big tale back then, But it wasn't her. Thank God.
The kitchen stove.
Oh, that was the grease, that bacon grease. That's the biggest fuss me and Maxine ever had. In all of our 59 years of marriage, I like my food cooked in bacon grease. They say it'll kill you if it never has. My fried potatoes, I want it fried in bacon grease, seasoned with bacon grease. Well, I was pastor of Spyro, and I had a little pot on the stove. I saved bacon grease in it. And I told my wife, I told Maxine, don't ever put any kind of grease in that pot but bacon grease. I had it half full. I was real proud of it. I worked in Fort Smith, Riverside Furniture. Come home work one evening, and she was cooking supper. She always had supper ready for me when I got home. I walked in the kitchen, she was frying chicken. And I walked in the kitchen just in time to see her pour that chicken grease into my bacon grease. That made me so mad. We had a fuss. I know the neighbors heard us. And now this was back in 1959. Years after that, me and her laugh about that. One of us would say bacon grease. That would always settle an argument, because that was a big thing. That's a big thing to me then. It ruined my bacon grease. Had to start all over again. Those little things make life interesting.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
Well, we lived in Hartford behind the cotton gin. Lived in a two-room house, and we had a wood stove. And Mama had bought it for $8. She was paying $2 a month, paying it out. $2 a month. Well, she liked one more payment. And our cousin Frank was living with us. And Mama gave him the $2 to go pay the last payment. Well, he didn't do it. And one day, Mama cooked a pot of beans and made cornbread and put up in the warmer on the stove. And that afternoon, here come a pickup truck up the lane. He backed up to the front door of the house. they came and repossessed that stove. Took down the stovepipe. Mama told them, said, that's my stovepipe. I paid for that. They left that. And they picked up our stove and put it in that pickup and started down the lane. And my sister, God bless her heart, happened to think that our pot of beans and cornbread was in that stove. And she ran down the lane, jumped up in the truck, and got that pot of beans and cornbread and jumped out. And we had supper that night, but we didn't have a stove to cook anything else on. That's the story of the stove.
You used to go to the town.
Well, I had a little red wagon. My aunt, my mama's sister, Aunt Mattie, she drank quite a bit, alcohol. And she's a Hebron, Oklahoma, walking down the street, staggering down the street. And she saw a little red wagon in the yard, belonged to some boy. She thought Billy'd like that. She just picked it up, pulled it off, and she brought it to me to Hartford. Once a month, we'd get commodities. We'd get lard, coffee, prunes, powdered sugar, powdered milk, all that stuff. And I'd pull it to town, my wagon, and load it up full of that stuff and pull it home, and that was our food for the next month. Wouldn't even eat it now. Boo. Back then, the butter, it was white like lard, and they give you little yellow packets of coloring. You put in it, you mix it up to make it look yellow like butter. That's the way we had to do it. Yeah, well, late one evening, my mother was, her boyfriend was over the mountain, part of the way down on the other side. We lived not too far from the mountain, and Mom wanted to go up there and see him. Him and another man was hunting bees. Now, if you don't know what hunting bees is, back in that then time, you go out in the woods, come to a little spring of water, you sit there and watch. Pretty soon here come a bee, get a drink of water, get up, take off. Pretty soon here come another one, and you follow them, and you finally come to a tree, look up, and you see them going in that knothole. You cut the tree down, and you get your honey. That's what they was doing. And anyway, late one evening, it was, I could see that now in my mind just like it happened yesterday. It was getting sundown, and I was barefooted. Pardon me. And Mama wanted to go up there and find Butch and this other man, and I begged her not to go. She threw a stick of wood at me. Here we started for the mountain. Me and Mom and Joanne climbed that mountain. We didn't have a light. There was no road. We just clawed our way up. We found about 2 o'clock in the morning. Slept on the ground the rest of the night. And you know, it's the strangest thing. Me and my sister, every time we'd get together, we'd talk about that. But neither one of us remember coming home the next day. We remember climbing the mountain. I remember just like it happened yesterday. But oh dear God, it was.
You still don't remember going home the next
No,
day?
neither one of us did.
How old were you at the time?
I was about 5.
5 years old.
He was before I started school.
Yeah.
And 5 years old, barefooted. I mean, I look back at that. I don't know how we ever made it. We could have got snake bit. We could have fell in a hole. I'll take y'all down there someday if you go with me. I'll take you in the pickup truck. I'll take you up there. They got a pretty good road up there.
Yeah.
Now.
They didn't back then.
No, they didn't have nothing.
That's one
Well, that was 1944. I was living in California. We had moved out there in 42, but I came back to Hartford for a few weeks. And I had some good friends, and on top of Pastoral Mountain, south of Hartford, is 7 miles up there from town. They have a tower, and they got a cabin where a man stays. One Sunday afternoon, we decided we'd walk up there. And we got halfway up the mountain, and we got getting the rain, and we got cold. And we stopped and had a little confab whether to go onto the mountain to the tower or whether to go back home. Well, we decided to go into the tower. When we got up there, one of the boys raised the window and went inside that cabin. That was government property. And we all went in, eat up everything the man had, and then went back home. A few weeks later, I was out plowing we had 2 mules, Pete and Jake. That was their names. I was out plowing out in the country. I saw this green truck come down the lane with a big arrow. It was Forest Service. And anyway, to make a long story short, they took us to court in Fort Smith. John E. Miller, federal judge. Because that, like I say, that was federal property. And I was only 14 years old. And they sentenced us to 1 year probation. They liked to put us in reform school. That scared me. And I remember during that time, one of them asked me a question. I answered, they said, say your honor. I said, your honor? To the judge, it scared me. I didn't know what to do. But we realized that we almost really got in trouble there. But we didn't really realize what we were doing either.
Yeah.
Now this one I think is from Pam. She said, have him sing the song about marrying a lady about 90 years old.
Okay, let's see here. As I was a-walking down beside the sea strand, I met a young lady and I bet she was grand. Diamonds and jewels and the finest of clothes. She looked to be 18 or 19 years old. I asked her to marry me and of course she said yes. We went to the courthouse looking our best. But when we returned home and retired for a rest, I faintly changed colors as my lover undressed. She took off her thin cheeks, a box full of paint. She pulled out her false teeth, I thought I would faint. She took off her peg leg clear up to her knee. She pulled some false fingers, I think she left 3. She took off her false hair and her bald head soon told I'd married an old lady about 90 years old.
Where did you learn that?
Oh, I've known that for 100 years. Oh, I used to sing this to Maxine. On Monday we have bread and gravy. On Tuesday we have gravy and bread. On Wednesday we have toast and gravy, which is nothing but gravy and bread. On Thursday I went to Miss Maxine. On Friday she changed and she said, when Saturday rolled around, the change that I found was gravy without any bread. Boom, boom. Nice night. Now I read this in Stockton, California, 1944. I was 14 years old. I never did forget it. I think it's kind of cute. It says like this. Nice night in June, stars shine, big moon. In park on bench, with girl in clinch. Me say me love, she coo like dove. She say okay, wedding bells, ring ring, honeymoon, everything. Another night in June, stars shine, big moon. Ain't happy no more, carry baby, walk floor. Wife mad, she fuss, me mad, me cuss. Life one big spat, nagging wife, balding brat. Me realize that last me just a little too fast. Well, I was living in California, and this was 1947. And there's a couple of Hartford. He was really my biological father. His wife, Sally, knew that I was his son, and she didn't like me. But they wrote me a letter, and they said, if you come back and help us plow 10 acres of cotton, we'll send you the money to come back on. And I was wanting to come back to Arkansas anyway, and I said, okay. I had some friends of mine that lived at Long Beach. They was moving back to Hartford. They had been our neighbors there, and they moved out there, then moving back. And I begged them to let me come with them. They didn't have room for me till I showed them the money, then they got room. And there were seven, now this is true, there were seven of us and a dog in a 35 Chevrolet pulling a trailer. It was worse than the grapes of wrath. Beverly Hillbillies. It took us, we left Long Beach Monday morning, took us 6 days to get to Hartford, and then till Saturday. Well, Sunday, wasn't anything to do, so the church is right down the lane from my house, right down the road. I went there once in a while when I was a little boy. My friend named Roy Kopesky, my best friend, we decided we'd go to church. And we went in, I sat on the right-hand side, and the preacher got up to preach. And I don't remember his text. I remember his sermon topic, 7 steps to making up your mind to serve God. And I was under conviction. I really wanted to be saved. But I had wanted to be saved for years. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how. My folks didn't go to church. They was giving the altar call. They was singing an old hymn called, "Oh, Why Not Tonight?" 4 flats. And my friend punched me and said, "Let's go outside and smoke." I smoked at the time. I said, okay. And while they were singing this song, we got up, started out. It was an old frame church, wood. And when you opened the front door, you was outside. There was no foyer, there was no porch, no nothing. Big rock for a step. Roy opened the door, stepped outside. I was in the door, and I turned and looked toward the front. And I started to the front, and I was saved before I ever got up there. I just accepted the Lord. And that's how I got saved. And I never did quit. That's been a long time ago. That has been 75 years ago.
And what happened to your friend?
My friend became an alcoholic and he died. I really thought lots of him. We were raised together in Hartford. But that could have been me. I've often thought about that. If I'd have stepped outside, if I'd took that one more step, I'd have been outside. I mean, I'd be here today. All my friends are dead. Here I am.
Still hanging on.
Still hanging on. Stay in church and serve the Lord. Put Him first in your life. You'll never regret it. You never will. I mean, when I was a boy, my folks, well, they didn't go to church. I always wanted Mama to go. I begged Mama to go to church with me. And yet God has given me everything I missed. I've 2 kids, 4 grandkids, 5 great-grand. They're all in church. Our grandson's a pastor in Colorado, in Washington. Josh, and got a good church out, the Foursquare Church out there. And my daughter and son-in-law, they're in the Assembly of God Church in Mountainburg. And they're all in church. Gary and Tammy, they're in church. We all are. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that.
What were Gary and Pam like growing up? Did they get along or did they fight? What was?
Well, brother and sister, you know, they fussed once in a while. We all did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't fight. Now, me and my sister, we didn't fuss. We fought. We did. We'd fight once in a while. But no, Gary and Tammy, Gary and Pam, they got along fairly well. They'd fuss once in a while, but they done all right.
Tell me a little bit about some of your favorite memories from Israel, traveling in Israel.
Well, I guess one thing is sailing the Sea of Galilee and being in that part of Israel up north, and Capernaum, the ruins of the old synagogues there where Christ preached. You read about that in Mark's Gospel. And the last time we was there was 2005, 17 years ago. We stayed on the Mount of Olives in the Seven Arches Hotel. And from our hotel, on the Mount of Olives, you look down into the city of Jerusalem, and you look east, and you can see just a little bit of the Dead Sea. And you can see the mountains of Jordan where Moses was buried, you know. To me, that's all fascinating. I didn't think in a million years I'd ever get to see anything like that. But I did. And I'm happy. Can we tell about that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay. At Hartford, when I got saved, started preaching, I felt like that God had called me to a healing ministry. So I got my bottle of olive oil, carried it in my pants pocket. Everywhere I went, I had a big greasy spot on my pocket. And anything looked sick or droopy, I'd pray for it, man or beast, it didn't matter. I prayed for a hog and it died. But anyway, one day, Miss Oliver, where I live, that old couple, we had a calf. She said, Billy, something's wrong with our calf. I believe it's going to die. I went out there, and sure enough, it couldn't get up. She'd been back in the house, and I thought, the Lord could heal that calf. And I pulled it up in the corner, and I had read somewhere where to anoint meant to pour on. So I quit just anointing people, started pouring oil on their head. I didn't get many calls to pray for people after that. But anyway, I pulled that calf up in the corner. I poured some oil on his head, prayed for it. About 2 hours later, Miss Oliver called me and she said, Billy, look out there. And that little calf was running around. Its little tail was just swinging over. It's fine, nothing wrong with it. Well, boy, I couldn't wait to get to church that night. That was Sunday afternoon. I had a testimony to give. Back then, we had testimony service in church. Well, when they said, we're going to have testimony service, who wants to testify? I jumped up like a jack in the box. I told them all about it. I did this, I did that, I did the other. You got to watch that eye stuff. The next night, just before dark, somebody knocked at our door. And I went to the door, and there stood a big old tall boy named Wayne Laird. Him and his sister came to our church. They were Nazarene, but the Nazarenes didn't have a church art until they came to our church. He was kind of shy and stuttered just a little bit. He said, Brother Billy, we was at church last night, and we heard you testify how you healed a calf. I didn't like the way that sounded. Anyway, he said, we got a sick cow. Would you come pray for her? Well, it like scared me to death, because the first thing I thought, if I pray for that cow and it dies after that testimony I give, it's going to ruin my testimony. We walked down the Rock Island Railroad track about a half a mile. Time we got to where they lived, it was about dark. They took me out to the barn. They had a lantern, a bunch of kids peeping through knotholes to see this miracle worker. And I took one look at that cow, and I'd had more faith if I had never seen it, because I knew she was going to die. Poor thing, you could hug your hat anywhere on her, bones sticking out. But I had to pray for her. I poured some oil on her head, prayed for her, went home and didn't sleep all night long because I knew she was going to die. I went to church the next time. I avoided them. Wrong is wrong, but I did. Finally, I left and started preaching. Went to California and come back. I was down at Mena. And this is about 30 years later. We had decoration of Hartford every Mother's Day. I told Maxine, let's go to Hartford today to decoration after church. And we did. When we got up there, the first person I seen was this woman that had that cow, Reba Repass. And I finally got the nerve. I went to her and I said, told her who I was. I said, do you remember the time that I prayed for your cow? And she said, yes, I do. I said, whatever happened to that cow? And she said, Brother Billy said she got well in just a few days and began to give more milk than she ever did. Then she told me, she said, we were very poor and we depended on that cow for milk and butter, and God knew that. And she got well. I learned a lesson there too. Be careful about saying I too much. Get you in trouble. Once a month would be power bill. we'd get a loaf of store-bought bread. Now, that was a big deal with us. They had wholesome and colonial bread out of Fort Smith. One day we went to town, paid the bill, started home out in the country. We had to cross a creek. It come a hard rain. And Mama had to put me on her back. And she gave me that loaf of bread and told me to hold it till we got to cross the creek. Well, I put it right here. And we started to cross the creek, and the end popped up. And here went that bread floating down the stream. We had biscuits for supper that night. And my sister wrote a poem about it. I've got it here, about that bread. A lot of those things I think about every day. They go through my mind.
Did you ever have any women in your congregation that took a liking to you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any stories about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had one. I was preaching revival not too far from here. And used to, back years ago, in the summertime, we didn't have air conditioning. And we'd set the seats outside and have church outside. And we did at this church. And there was a woman there, played the piano. And she never had been saved. She never had been married, but wanted to be real bad. And me and the pastor and his wife were an old couple. Brother and Sister Terry, God bless their hearts. Anyway, we agreed in prayer that she'd get saved in that revival. We knew if she did, man, don't tell what would happen. One night, this woman come to me and said, could I talk to you in the morning? I live right down the road here. I'll be at my sister's house. Told me where it was. I said, yeah. I thought she wanted to get saved. I said, ooh-wee. She said, can you be there at 9 o'clock? I said, I'll be there. Well, I told this pastor and his wife about that, and they didn't seem excited about it. I wondered why. Well, the next morning I got my bottle. Here I went. It wouldn't start half the time. But I went down there to the house. She met me at the door. We went in and sat down. I noticed the doors were all closed, the other rooms. No one there but her. I thought her sister would be there. Well, we sat down on the couch. She sat on one end, I sat on the small couch. And we just small talk. I thought any minute she's going to say, will you pray with me? I want to get saved. That wasn't why she wanted. That wasn't why I was there. And during that conversation, she reached over and got me by the chin like this. She shook it. And she said, I'd give $1 to kiss you. Here she comes. She's a big woman. She weighed about 250. She wasn't real fast. She's just strong. Like a boxer in the yard, you know. Yeah. And boy, she got a hold of me, and I put my hands on her shoulder. I pushed. And finally, when she let me up air, I jumped up, and she grabbed me and kissed me again. That was $2 she owed me. And I literally ran for the door. And she caught me the third time and kissed me the third time. And I ran out of the house, jumped into that car, afraid it wouldn't start. I thought it was, she didn't have you. I had to go get out of here. And you know, I went to church that night. First time in my life I prayed for someone not to be at church. But she's sitting on the front seat. Winked at me all the time I was preaching. That's hard to preach when people are winking at you like that. Especially a woman, you know. And you know what? She followed me around for years up there, even after I got married. Really? I could have had her arrested for stalking me. Yeah, I was afraid of her. Well, down at Midland, one got up and testified, and she told us a testimony like this. And she said, this gospel don't only need to be preached in America, but all over the United States. And over at Shady Point, Oklahoma, a woman there testified. And she said this. She said, and Jesus is my Savior, my soon coming coon. She meant king. I think she did anyway. First time I met Maxine was 1952. I was in a revival, No, it's November of 52. I was in revival Spiral. And back then we had church Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Well, it was Sunday night. In come Maxine, her mom and dad, her sister and two brothers, 6 of them. And they were just a family you'd take notice to. Nice looking, well, clean. And of course I noticed Maxine, I thought she was pretty. And that night when I gave the altar call, she came and knelt right in front of me. Now I didn't know this till just a few months ago, and Pam told me that she told Pam she knelt in front of me so I'd notice her. And I did. And after that, I went to Alaska the next January. And while I was in Alaska, I wrote her a letter. And she answered it. And I came back. I was holding a revival over there. And her mom invited me home with them to eat dinner one Sunday. We had goose. That's what we had that day. I never ate goose in my life. And then we began to spark and spoon a little bit. And one day I was into revival at Van Buren, September 52. And I made up my mind to ask her to marry me. And I went over there to her mom and dad's house. They lived at Shady Point, just past Spiro. And we was in the house all talking, and I told Maxine, I said, but I'm going to have to go. It was hard for me to ask her. We walked out, I got in the car, it's sprinkling rain, and she stood and talked to me a minute, and I lost my nerve, and I got out and went back in the house. We talked, and I said, well, I got to go again. We got in the car again. I did that about 2 or 3 times. Finally asked her if she'd marry me. She said, yeah. And we got married there in Spiro Parsonage. No one there but me and Maxine, the preacher, and his wife and her daddy. It was January 23rd, snow on the ground. I had about $2.50 left. And I was pastoring down east of Auburn. And we took off down there and we began our life together. She was a wonderful wife. She's a good wife. She was a good mother, good cook. She couldn't cook when we got married. Oh dear God. The first pot of beans she cooked, I don't think there's a dozen beans in the whole pot. And you had to run them down, hem them up. No seasoning, no nothing. She couldn't cook at all. But she learned real quick. Her mama was a good cook. And she became a good cook. But we never did have any serious problems. We fussed very little. You can ask her kids. What's the use in doing that? But she was a good person. I still miss her. One of the happiest periods of our life was when we lived in California in Taft and Mena. We did well there. And I know in Taft we had a man one day. She sat near the front of the church. And a man come in church with a, what do you call it? Well, I had to show you what sword. What do you call it? Well, he was just a little mentally challenged. And he come and sat right behind her, and her eyes that big. She was all scared of him. I know there at Taft one day, I was given the invitation, and this guy was there. He had eyes that big. And while I was given the invitation, he walked up there to me and was standing right here, and I didn't know it. And over my eyes, I jumped straight up. It scared me half to death. But, I don't know. I couldn't tell you any special thing. She was just a special person. She came from a good family. I was in that family all those years. I never had a crossword with a member of them. Her mom and dad loved me like their own kid. I come by yesterday to visit her sister and her brother, and then her brother and his wife took me out to lunch at Eunice's, at chicken and dumplings. It's good. Well, the first year we was married, I preached a little church east of Waldron. And in the summertime, that entire church went to the cotton patch in eastern Arkansas. They had to close church down, so we had to go with them. It was awful. We lived in a big tin building. We had a wire across the corner with a sheet. And that's where we lived. And I had a waffle iron I bought her for Christmas. You don't buy your wife things like that. You buy perfume, but I didn't know. But I bought her waffle iron. You could cook bacon, ham, eggs on it, and waffles. And that was our stove. And she'd get up, she'd pick cotton with me. It was over 100 degrees. And one day, we was out picking cotton, and I looked back at her. I felt so sorry for her. She had a big curl hanging down right here. She looked at me so disgusted, she blew that curl up. And she said, I thought I married a preacher instead of a cotton picker. But one day she said to me, she said, Billy, wouldn't it be good to live in a rock house with a tile floor? Tile was a thing back then. And have an indoor bathroom. That sounded like something way off in the distance. I said, boy, it would. It wasn't just a few weeks later, me and the church called us. We went down and then ruined us a house, completely furnished, a rock house with tile floors and indoor bathroom. Everything we wanted. You want me to tell about that?
Yeah, and then I got one more after that.
Okay, we lived in Rosa, California. I was pastoring out there, and I went to work in Visalia, McMahon's furniture store. We was taught to keep the furniture moving, which makes sense. If they have an old couch, an old chair, been there a long time, they'd put a spiff on it. That means a little bonus. And you sell that. At the end of the month, they'd figure up all that you'd sold, give you a separate check. Well, we had swag lamps hanging all over the store, and I wanted one. I told Maxine, I said, when I get able, I get some extra money, I'll buy us a swag lamp. Well, there's times you do things that not exactly right, but neither does seem exactly wrong. Well, this is one of them cases. Two men from the church came in. They said, Pastor, we want to buy our mother a swag lamp. Would you help us pick one out for her? Well, over in the corner, there was one hanging, been there 3 years. No one would buy it. Ugliest one in the store. It had been marked down to $14.88. Had a good bonus on it. I thought, man, this is a good chance to get rid of that thing. I took them over there and I said, I think she'd like this one. They said, you like it? I said, well, yeah. They bought it. Paid for it, left, and I was rejoicing. Got rid of old Swaggy. The next Sunday morning, before Christmas, the church board called me and Maxine, Pam, and Gary down to the front of the church to give us our Christmas gift. In come these two ladies with a box. I took one look at that box. I thought, I've seen you before. And they set it on the altar, opened it up, and there it was. It was that swag lamp. And now this is 1992. This is 2022. I've still got it. And this was 1965, 35, 45, 57 years ago. Still got it in a closet in here. Oh, that was in Kentucky. I held a revival in Frankfort, outside town, and there was a preacher in Louisville heard of me, and he wanted me to hold a revival. So the pastor and another guy took me over there to Louisville, going to start a revival that night. And this was weird, and we got there, the church was full of people, and two reporters from the United Press sitting on the front seat. I thought, man, this is big, they're going to take my picture. But it wasn't me they was looking for. The man that had that organization announced that night he was going to run for president, and he signed, and they took his picture and it was on the paper the next day. But after church, the pastor took me to an old couple and said, you're going to stay with these folks. Well, I put my glad rags in their old Nash, two seat, two door car. I got in the back seat, and we started at their house. They lived on the other side of Louisville, up Jefferson Avenue, right downtown. And he's driving like this. He said, "You know, Brother Billy, I can't hardly see you drive at night." But like they brought me alive, I said, like, I could see good. I drove the rest of the time. But when we got to their house, we got out. It was big buildings on either side. It was real dark, spooky looking. I got up on the front porch and they said, "You can't go in that way. You have to come around this way." They said, "There's two women that lives there in that room there, right next to where you're going to stay." And they told me one of them is mentally challenged and the other one has arthritis. And so they took me around. We went in the house, sat down, and I wouldn't like it. Or I began to get this weird feeling. I wish I wasn't here, you know. And we sat down on a sofa, and the little one, they brought me out a big album full of pictures. And we was looking through them, and finally come to a picture of a young man in an army uniform. And I said, "Who's this?" And she said, "That's my son." And here's exactly what she said. And she said, "His leg is in there in the closet in the room where you sleep." Well, I've got a vivid imagination. I could see a big bloody leg in there. Already I wish I wasn't there. But them two ladies next there, and you couldn't lock the door between the room and mine. Well, I stayed there for a week. Never one time ever did I look down. I hung my clothes in my closet. I'd get dressed. Never looked down. I did not want to see that leg because I had a picture in my mind, you know. And them two ladies, one of them named Jenny, and one of them looked like a gopher, had one big old tooth hanging down right here. One day I felt like this, looking at me, and I looked, sure enough, the door was about that, peeking at me, getting dressed, you know. And my revival closed on Sunday night. I had them take me to the bus station after church. I didn't know where the bus was going, but I was getting on it. And I went to California, then on to Alaska, then back to LA, then back to Hartford.
So tell me about, you were in Alaska at the revival, and you didn't know how you were going to get home. You didn't have money.
I didn't know how. I preached a solid month. They didn't give me one offering. But they couldn't. I found out later. Up there, they worked all summer in the canneries. And they charge everything during the winter, and they'd pay their bill. They didn't have any money. And I preached a solid month, not one penny. When my revival was over, I was ready to come home. So I went down to church and prayed. And I asked God, I said, "God, if you don't care, I'd like to go home." I didn't have any money at all, and so helped me in 3 or 4 days. Money began to come through the mail, and I had more than enough money to fly me to LA. That happened. Oh, yeah. That doesn't mean that's not one of these, you know. There's a woman in town trying to sell me a set of rural books. Well, I couldn't afford to buy them, but I didn't want to tell her that. About once a month, she'd come to the house and sit there and try to sell me them books. Instead of me telling her I don't want them, I'd say, "Well, maybe next time." Well, I'd give her a little hope. She'd come back next month. One day, Maxine Pam was in town shopping. We lived just off the main street there. Me and Gary was home by herself. I hadn't seen Gary for a while. And I heard a car door slam out front. I looked out, and here come this woman up the steps with her attaché case, with a look in her eye like, "I'm going to sell him them books today." I thought, "Oh, God, I can't stand to face that woman today." I looked around. I didn't see Gary anywhere. I'm ashamed of it, but I ran in the bedroom, in the closet, and closed the door. I heard her knock. And then I heard this voice say, "Is your father home?" And I heard this other voice say, "Yes, he is. He's in the closet. Come on in, I'll get him." And Gary come in and got me out of the closet. I was so embarrassed. I got my checkbook on the way in there, bought the books. Kept about 40 years. Give them away when I moved up here. You live and learn. I went to pray for a man one time. I had my bottle of oil. He took it and drunk it. He did. He said he thought that healing me. He drank my whole bottle of oil. I don't know why he did that, but he did.
Did it heal him?
Well, he's dead now. Didn't do much good.
Well, is there anything that you would like to say to your family, your friends, anybody who might watch this? Look in right here
Well,
and tell them anything you'd like to say.
here I am, 92 years old. As far as wealth, I have very little. But I'm thankful for my family, my 2 kids, all my grandkids. And I have a lot of friends, California and Arkansas, Oklahoma. They mean a lot to me. And these 2 young men here today, I love both of them very much. I'm glad that God let them cross my path in this life. Hope to see you all in heaven someday. Bye.
Thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time. We love you, Brother Billy.
Well, I love you all too.